Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, and welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. I hope you and yours are well. Nice to have you back again. Been a heck of a week, lots to talk about. First thing, just let me say, welcome back, Eva. You were sadly missed by us all and by our viewers. Lots of messages. I hope you're on the mend.
I am indeed. It's nice to be back. And yes, I did miss you.
We miss you too, because actually, I'll take that opportunity if I may now. One of the topics we discussed last week, and I loved you to be here particularly, was the Scottish Government's idea to get rid of no proving. What's your thoughts on that?
Very badly thought out, particularly if you know your history and the fact that in the olden days in Scotland, you were either proven or not proven, so that you're only guilty if it's proof beyond reasonable doubt. So these days, you'll still be guilty if it's proof beyond reasonable doubt, and all you've done is taken an option away from a jury and made it perhaps more likely that there'd be more miscarriages of justice. What you've not done actually is securing the convictions of more people who should have been convicted, but people think somehow got off. The burden of proof, the onus of proof, those have not changed. So proof beyond reasonable doubt remains the only way that somebody can be convicted, regardless of how many different possibilities there are for something short of guilty. So it's a retrograde step, and it's a very dangerous one. And I would suggest that it has very sinister motivation behind it.
Yep, just one last question. Just came to my mind when you were saying to me there. So if you're found not guilty or guilty, and that's only two decisions they're going to have now, but if you're not proven, does that mean that you can be retried again? But if you're found not guilty, I've forgotten that phrase again, I can't remember, Fred McMurray film, what you call it again, where you can't be tried twice.
Double jeopardy.
Double jeopardy. So does double jeopardy work with not proven but wouldn't with not guilty?
No, there are very specific rules in relation to whether you can be tried again. So whether there's a not proven in existence or not, it doesn't really affect that.
Okay.
It's
Anyway.
still this day, and it's one that academics and lawyers are opposed to, and so will people who in due course watch how this develops and see that it doesn't achieve the result that was intended, because the intended result was that more people be convicted, but people should only be convicted if there's proof beyond reasonable doubt, and removing an option less than guilty doesn't do that. And it's not the hallmark of a progressive justice system. I'd suggest it's the hallmark of a justice system that is regressing.
I agree. Anyway, it was a heck of a week we had this week, Phil. And where I'd like to start is that some very good news for the SNP this week, as well as for the independence movement, which I would, like to get to. And here it is that the SNP are 17 points ahead in the polls. It shows that they're virtually going to have almost repeat 2011. If this, and I have, the guy on the television says in general election, this is just a poll. Don't read too much into it. But if this was to continue, the SNP would be a couple of seats off of a total majority. But it also means that their list votes, as in the last two elections, would be an absolute waste of people's time. It would just elect unionists, not SNP MSPs on the list.
Yeah, and we talked about this briefly before we started, and there were some very good points made by Lloyd and Eva on this, so hopefully we'll get to that quickly. This is a surveyation poll, and they report that out of 2,051 Scots residents aged 16 or more on their Holyrood voting intentions, it's SNP in 37% of the vote, which is up 4% since May, with the Labour Party trailing behind on 20%, which is up 1%, and Reform in third, which is at 18%, down 1%. Now, the SNP have also extended their lead in the Westminster voting intention, now sitting at 35%, up 3%, with a gap of 16 points between them and Labour at 19%, Reform also at 19%. But 37% for SNP is still well short of the 55% or so in Scotland who want Scottish independence. And if the SNP continue with their SNP 1 and 2 stance, along with a Section 30 request, then they must be punished to force the leadership out of SNP so it can again truly represent the wants and the needs of the people. I mean, I hope this disaffection that the Scottish people are truly showing the SNP is affecting some of these decisions to walk away from the betrayal of the Scottish people by the SNP that the SNP leadership currently practice. We're looking at Kate Forbes, Humza, Michelle Thompson, Shona Robertson, Christine Graham, Michael Matheson, James Dornan, Fiona Hislop, blah, blah. The list goes on and on. And the scary thing is they're all resigning. They're not going to stand for re-election. And the scary thing is we see is the standard of the young, clueless puppets that have been pushed in as replacement. Now, we all know that unification is the only way forward, well, except SNP. Everyone else in the independent movement knows this. But this poll looks suspect, and I'll let Lloyd and Eva go into that. The Daily Express reported that John Swinney's by-election nightmare continues. The SNP slumped to the 7th defeat in a row. The First Minister Swinney had now overseen 7 by-election defeats in a row as the SNP crashed to 2 losses in the Highlands, with one a seat defence, which the party finished 3rd. So John Swinney's, I mean, it was on Friday as the SNP crashed to 2 defeats in a row, and the same day, it wasn't a great day for independence, as the SNP purported Party of Independence fell to 3rd in Tain and Easter Ross, normally an SNP stronghold, and currently Marie Todd is there, and now just shortly after it was announced that the SNP finished 4th in Cowal Mallaig, which is Kate Forbes' constituency. Now, both her seat and Todd's are targets for the Lib Dems heading into the Holyrood elections, and they believe they can take them off them. So I have serious suspicions about the accuracy of this outcome of the Survation poll.
The problem, as I say, with Survation is we're a member of the British Polling Corporation, and they can't fiddle the figures, or they're in serious trouble. But it depends the question asked, or how it's. That's the important thing, is what we don't know what questions were actually asked, or do we? I don't know, Eva. Do we?
There was a series of questions asked, but I think the one we're particularly concerned with is, would you vote SNP if you were voting? A lot of people won't bother to vote. And we've seen that from voter apathy, as Phil has just referred to, in these recent by-elections. And, back in the day, back in 2007, 2011, if Alex Salmond had been going into a Holyrood election with figures like that, he'd have been cock-a-hoop, but so would the rest of us in the entire SNP and in the movement, because we knew that the party was led by a man who was driven to achieve the very best for Scotland that we possibly could. His mantra was realise the potential of our greatest resource, the people of Scotland, and he was right then, and he would be right now, but he's still here. But even if the ghost of Alex Salmond, or the spirit of William Wallace, Robert the Bruce, Margaret MacDonald, every single one of those great people, Jimmy Reid and all, if all of those ghosts and spirits were standing for the SNP now, we would still be hobbled, because there is no I in the current SNP leadership team. The independence word doesn't feature often enough or properly enough, because they have no joined up, constructive, positive, feasible independence campaign. And that's why they've got amendments from a set of rebels in one faction, and from, I think it's the West Fife and Coastal Villages, have another amendment. And those amendments are designed to try to persuade the SNP leadership to adopt a realistic strategy. In the absence of a realistic strategy, then it doesn't matter one iota how high the SNP are standing in the polls. Voting SNP will not regain Scotland her independence. And that's the pity, that's the shame, that's the sadness. And it's also the humiliation of crowing headlines like these that John Swinney welcomes. I mean, I watched a speech he made the other day about how, in essence, it was his mission to eradicate child poverty. He referred again, and my heart was in my boots as I heard it, the baby box. He spoke about the Scottish child payment. These are good things, but on their own, they're sticking plasters on hemorrhaging wounds. We say this time after time. And so, yes, it's good that the SNP are high in the polls if the SNP voters understand the voting system, and if they understand that both votes SNP lets the unionists in by the back door. It has been established over and over again that that's what both votes SNP actually does. So if you're thinking about voting SNP in the constituency, for God's sake, don't make the mistake of voting SNP on the list, because what you'll do probably is elect some unionists. But you also need to think very carefully about whether your own SNP candidate is actually a candidate for independence. I'm standing in Clackmannanshire and Dunblane because I don't believe that my current SNP MSP has it in his heart or in his soul or in his spine to fight for independence and make independence the priority. And that's the difficulty with the SNP. They've lost their way in the context of being run and managed by a leadership who have settled for second best. And the publicity that they've had in this poll is designed deliberately by unionists, regardless of the integrity of the poll or otherwise. The publicity that's followed on from it, the media manipulation, the headlines and the crowing that you've seen is designed to maintain an independence movement which is split, and it will continue to be split unless and until the leaders of individual parties put country before party and understand that we should be breaking out of Westminster rules and British rules and using Scottish rules for next year's election and using that to deliver independence, not to deliver another devolved settlement where Scotland is furled to Westminster, we get our own money doled back out to us in dribs and drabs, rather than being able to stand on our own 2 feet, take responsibility for ourselves and for our own actions and harness our resources for the good of our country. So the SNP can rocket in the polls. Doesn't make any odds they can win every constituency seat, but they're not going to win the list seats, and they'll let the unionists in and there'll be mayhem.
I should just shoot a clarification. The leaders of the ISP, Sovereignty and Indie for Indie have put country before party and have united and liberate Scotland. So they should get a mention. I was thinking you were going to do that, Eva. And the other thing, if I'm not mistaken, Alan, I don't think there's been a debate on independence at the SNP 2 conferences a year since 2014, since the despot took over. There was never a debate, because remember what happened to Angus MacNeil and Chris McElhenney when they tried to have what's plan B. So I think this is, am I right in saying this is the first debate they've ever had in 11 years on independence?
Well, let's see if it's a debate first. There's still time for things to happen.
You're such a cynic, Alan. You're such a cynic.
I know. Been there, done that before. But this poll, I mean, what we've got to look at is, and it's what we say all the time, you follow the money. But look who actually instigated this poll. I believe it was Scotland and Union, a unionist organisation. So they will be the ones who put the questions together. Now, when you're doing an opinion poll, I don't know if anybody else has ever been polled, but they ask you certain questions and it leads you into a certain way, depending on how you answer that. So if they ask you lots of questions and you are pro-independence, at the end of it, they give you a list of parties who you are going to vote for. If there's only one independence party there, you've only got one that you can say, and that is the SNP, which could manipulate the voting intentions of people. But even on 17%, say that was true, 17% lead they have in the polls. Let's look at actual election results. In 2021, the SNP got 47.7% of the votes. The nearest to them was the Tories on 21.9% of the votes. That gave them a lead of 25.8%. Are we any closer to independence? No, we're not. It doesn't matter how big a vote that the SNP are getting, unless they grow a backbone and start doing things for the independence movement, we are pissing in the wind. We really are. Because it doesn't matter about which party you get into Holyrood. It's the people who are representing you in Holyrood that counts. And if they're not going to push what you are voting for, which in our case would be independence, nothing less, then it's a waste of time. And that's why Liberate Scotland are standing on both constituency and on the list. Now, the reason our situation doesn't affect us like the SNP is because on constituency votes, Liberate Scotland is a coalition. So we will have ISP members standing on constituency. We will have sovereignty members standing on constituency. If they get elected, that does not affect sovereignty. Liberate Scotland's list vote. Every single vote for Liberate Scotland on the list will be counted. It will not be divided by the constituency seats that have been won. And that's the tactic that we have to use. The Unionists have abused and used the system that they created to stop independence. We must now play the game by our rules. So we make sure that our votes count, and that's every single one of our votes. So as our votes are not being taken off the list because we got someone elected at constituency level. And that's the only way we're going to get independence.
Yeah, we are more interested in outcomes than incomes. Taking these numbers as right, Lloyd, and that they've got a 17-point lead and we're close. The reality, absolute reality is we could win our independence in May 26 if the SNP held out the hand of unity and joined with the others, with the Liberate Scotland, with Alapa, with whoever in the independence. We could be actually free of the union next year.
That's certainly true, Roddy. I doubt very much whether the SNP will put out the hand, as it were, and go into negotiations with the rest of the movement prior to next year's election. But here is a great opportunity for John Swinney to prove his credentials as the leader of the leading independence party of our country. With a 17-point lead and a clear likelihood of a majority of SNP seats in the Parliament from the constituency vote, then John has to be honest with the people and point out that the electoral system will prevent the SNP from gaining many seats from the regional lists. And what he should be saying to SNP voters, whether he goes into negotiation or put out the hand of friendship to the rest of the movement, what he should be saying to his own SNP voters is, to vote for the SNP on the regional list will waste your vote and allow unionists into the Parliament and deny us the right of independence in May 2026. He should be telling people that on the regional list, you have to vote for another independence party. And ideally, that party should be, or that umbrella should be, Liberate Scotland. And I would make a plea to the Alapa party. The Alapa party should think seriously also about joining the coalition that is Liberate Scotland, to maximise the opportunity that we have to deliver independence next year. But most of all, this is the test of the SNP leadership and its belief in country before party, because it's very, very obvious that what is coming down the track in the United Kingdom in the future is a shift to the right, which will damage our people and our country to a far greater degree than even Thatcher did. The opportunity at next year's election is to make it the independence election if we have honesty from John Swinney, who will recognise that he will have the majority of constituency seats in the election, and that if he instructs, or indeed just simply asks SNP voters to vote for Liberate Scotland, for the national movement, for pro-independence parties on the regional list, then we will have an overwhelming majority in the Parliament for us to begin the negotiations required to take us out of this benighted union and take us to our independence. Particularly in a situation like we have at the moment, where there's been a fantastic initiative towards the United Nations by Liberation Scotland and Salvo and the Scottish Sovereignty Research Group. They've started the first steps. Those steps have been received extremely well by countries across the world and their representatives in Geneva. Now is the time for the Scottish National Party to get behind that particular initiative as a preparation for what we are going to achieve in 2026 if John Swinney and the leadership of the SNP bite the bullet and accept that next year the opportunity exists, unlike it has, this opportunity has existed once before, and it was when Phil Boswell and 56 other members of the Scottish National Party were sent to Westminster. At that point, a fleet-footed leadership would have recognised that then was the time for us to make the move and demand our independence. But next year, a plebiscite, effectively a plebiscite election, and support for the Liberation Scotland Initiative at the United Nations and the initiatives with the European Free Trade Agreement area, that combined with the honesty and the courage of John Swinney to say to his own voters, do not vote for the Scottish National Party on the regional list, because that ultimately will deliver unionist members into the Parliament and make our independence further away, when at the moment it is clearly, as these opinion polls clearly show, it is within our grasp. And also, I would suggest this in addition, if the Scottish National Party is on 37% in the polling for next year's election, but support for independence is between 52 and 56%, then that gap between support for the SNP and support for independence can only be filled by the other parties of the national movement. And it's incumbent on John, incumbent on the leader of the Scottish National Party and First Minister of this country, to instruct and suggest to people that a vote for the SNP on the regional list will only deliver unionist members of Parliament, when in actual fact support for particularly Liberate Scotland and possibly Alba too, if they come under that banner, that will deliver us the mandate we require to take our independence next year in May 2026.
Yeah, indeed, a great idea. The other thing would be even easier, Lloyd, is that if he doesn't have to announce, don't vote for us on the list. They just, 6 weeks before polling, you have to give the Electoral Commission your list of candidates for the list. Just don't put anyone on the list.
I think that would be the easiest way, but I think for any leader of the Scottish National Party, particularly when you have some extremely young and ambitious people who may well be on that list, that may lead to internal squabbles that we don't really require when we can deliver properly. I think John has to actually say to his party, this is our strategy. Our strategy is to deliver independence, and the means by which we do that is by asking people not to vote for the Scottish National Party on the list. Let them stand on the list, because some people will want to vote for the SNP for whatever bizarre reasons they may have on the list, despite the fact that it's more likely to deliver unionist members. But I think John would find himself under internal pressure, wary to suggest, don't vote for my party. I think it's a strategy that could lead to conflict within the SNP, and from the conflict within the SNP, possible conflict when we need absolute unity going into the negotiations of our independence.
Yeah. I also think he'd come under huge pressure by the foreign media in the UK. The whole union stuff would turn on him if he says, don't vote for us in the poll. Oh, they're cheating. And that would give them an excuse to deny the election result. So therefore, I just say, don't put on a list. Just we didn't put any candidates in, vote for us in the constituency.
I think we have to be honest, Roddy. The last time it was suggested that by Alex Salmond that we maximise the vote by separating the SNP vote from the independence vote on the regional list, the immediate cry from the unionists was that this is cheating. Well, we have to be very honest about this. The whole voting system, of which I was elected on in 1999, was deliberately set up to create the circumstance whereby no party would have, and remembering that at that time there was only one independence party, that only a coalition within the Parliament would deliver a majority. Now, Alex Salmond defeated that by an anomaly, very much so. But I have to say this, way back in 2001, I met with a very senior member of the Basque National Movement who had looked at the voting system that we were subject to. And he said to me, he was also a constitutional lawyer and as well as being a member of the European Parliament. And he said to me, why is it you don't split your party into two parts? It's there for you to take. Because this system is deliberately structured to prevent you achieving a majority and preventing you from getting your independence. Whereas if you created one party for the constituency and one party for the list, then within two elections, there was no doubt in his mind that we would have been independent. In actual fact, if you look at that, if that strategy had been applied post 1999, we probably would have been independent by 2011.
Yeah.
You know, so let's not waste for the future generations. Let's not waste another 10 years, another 5 years. Let's not waste another year. The opportunity exists in May 2026 to deliver a majority in our parliament, a majority with absolute legitimacy to declare our independence. Never mind beg for it.
Exactly. Because you can always see the unions, go back those days who were on it. It was Jim Wallace of the Liberal Party, Jack McConnell, and Annabel Goldie, who were part of that, bringing in devolution. You can almost say, yeah, let's, as you said, there's only one party. Make it so, let's have a voting system so that you need two parties, and there's only one of them, and they can never have it. Well, there's now more than one. The unionists saw it before the SNP, obviously, or the present leadership. But here's the thing, Phil. Wouldn't there always also be another bonus for the SNP? I truly believe there are some people who will never vote for the SNP again because of their views on gender, etc., and other things that they've done. I understand that. But I believe if he was to come out, John, and his leadership and say, here's what we're going to do, whether it's not stand candidates in the list or unite the movement, the SNP themselves would get a huge boost in the polls. That 18-20% Lloyd was talking about, who are not voting anywhere just now, he would get something, even if he get half of that, say, they would be up at 46%, they would run amok in the constituencies.
Yes, it's exactly the right strategy, and with the continued strategy the SNP have, which is a nonsense idea, especially when Starmer says now, not ever, and they're not going to change this at all. Lloyd's on the money in his last comments, and our poor and suffering are the ones who pay most for it through drug abuse, poverty. There's only way we can get rid of poverty and help those who are struggling most in Scotland. We don't have time to waste here. SNP must do exactly as Lloyd has described and ask SNP voters not to vote for SNP in the list. Otherwise, if they don't do this, it confirms to me their betrayal of the Scottish people that we've been talking about for a long time now. But they won't change, because Swinney and the current leadership of the SNP are not progressing independence, and they've remained stationary at best. There's a strong case to illustrate they've instead reversed away from moving towards independence, because the current strategy of SNP 1 and 2 plus a Section 30 will not work. Even St Nicholas states as much, yet these traitors still follow this strategy. Now, how is this deliberately sabotaging the cause for independence? Well, since Nicola took over, the SNP fought Brexit. Oh, we're going to save you from yourselves. At a time when the British government was a shambles, at its weakest. Well, present time accepted, perhaps. We should have made bold moves for independence via plebiscite election, as again Lloyd has mentioned when the 56 went down. Read all these mandates, and we had the impetus we got from Alex's handover in 2014, and she did nothing with it, nothing positive with it, only negative. Then the attempted political execution of Alex Salmond by Nicola and the leadership of the SNP. Then the whole gender recognition sham. Then Swinney uniting the unionists around trying to keep down reform. And as for a clear plan to free the people of Scotland, what is the plan, Nicola Humza, John? I mean, even the National reported, this is back in October 23 when Humza was there, that the SNP hasn't changed its independence strategy in any significant way. And what is a Section 30? People need to understand. Under the current system of devolution, the Scottish Parliament is unable to legislate on reserved matters, such as defence and the Constitution, and they are the responsibility of the UK Parliament alone. And a Section 30 order allows us to do something about that and have an election. Every UK leader has said no. So stop lying to the people of Scotland, John. And you and the rest of this shysterous traitors in charge of SNP should do the decent thing, resign and leave it to the people. Unless your only path to salvation is to do as has been suggested here, and help us free the people of Scotland. But I believe that you and the SNP leadership, like the Iron Lady, are not for turning from this path.
I remember, being an old man who joined the party in the late 1960s. The great thing was we knew then, although the numbers weren't with it, was that we just had to get a majority. Even Thatcher admitted a majority of MPs from Scotland, just a majority. Not all of them, and there was nothing about 50% of the vote, just a majority, and they can have their independence, she said. It's changed now. The other one is, I believe that, and I've said it for a long while, so I'm not just making this up now, as you all know, I believe that every election should be a plebiscite election, because we only need to win once. They've got to win every single time. So surely, Eva, that would be this. He can persist with this Section 30. And I want to go, that's the SNP policy, a Section 30, and we'll have a referendum, not a plebiscite election. Techie, can you stick up that video? Because here's what we're up against, and this is this week, Eva.
Will you allow, that is in your power, it's your decision, will you allow a second independence referendum?
At the last budget, we had a record settlement for Scotland, more money than has ever been given to Scotland under the budget.
You're not answering my question.
I will come to that. I just want to just
well, we're
make
nearly
this
out of
point,
time, sir.
Because the point about independence for me is it's a distraction tactic which is always deployed by the SNP when they don't want a discussion about their
You won
record.
a majority at the last election. You're doing things that weren't in your manifesto. If the SNP win a majority, why can't they do what's in their manifesto?
I'm expressing my deeply held view that whenever the SNP are pressed on their record in office,
but you're not ruling it out. You're not ruling out an independence referendum.
We're not having an independence referendum. It is a
so you are ruling it out. It won't happen.
It won't happen. It is a distraction.
Despite, even if they win a majority.
It is a distraction from the record of the SNP.
He got a cheat talking about distraction. I don't want to talk about it. We've given them record money distraction. And John continues and believes that you can deal with that man who denies a genocide. Do you want to trust him to give you respect our democratic right?
That was absolutely perfect. That video should be shown over and over again, morning, noon, and night. An emphasis should be placed on the word given, because he treats Scotland as if we're, in essence, the surly teenager in their first job who hands over the full pay packet and gets back a couple of quid a week for a packet of fags and a bottle of drink. It is utterly appalling. Scotland does not require to be dependent on Westminster for anything, but at the moment, John Swinney needs to pay attention. Keir Starmer is confirming, reiterating, underscoring and underlining the British imperial attitude towards the people of Scotland and Scotland's status as a nation. He is belittling our democratic processes, and he's making damn sure that if it's up to him, Scots would never have the opportunity to vote on their constitutional future ever again. If that is not a colony, God knows what is. You were talking earlier, and Phil particularly, and Lloyd, about Salvo and Liberation Scotland, the UN, Geneva, EFTA, etc. For those who've not watched already, please watch all the videos that are available. Pay particular attention to Alf Baird, Robert Black, and especially Ailsa Gray, and see how these possibilities for Scotland might evolve in the future. But Scotland will not have a vote on independence, a referendum, if we leave it to John Swinney and the current leadership of the SNP. Keir Starmer has made that crystal clear, and he follows in the footsteps of how many? Theresa May, in no particular order, Liz Truss, Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, and now we've got Keir Starmer, each and every one of them denying the democratic right of the people of Scotland. And somehow the SNP think that if they get a majority next year, that overnight Starmer, or whoever happens to be the Prime Minister at that stage, will change their mind. Why? Why should they change their mind? There is no reason for them to change their mind. Nothing will ever change the opinion or the attitude of the Westminster Unionist parties towards the people of Scotland. The only thing that will work is if the people of Scotland take their own power into their own hands and stop playing by Westminster rules and stop reaching out with a begging bowl in hand, pleading for a little more, sir, because that Oliver Twist mentality should have been consigned to the dustbin in 2014. What is required is not just unity, but statecraft and statesmen and stateswomen who have courage and a backbone and understand the processes and who are not scared to stand up and to fight and to argue and to contend for Scotland across all political possibilities and in every possible forum, because we need international recognition, and we're on the way there thanks to the people who were in Geneva last week. We need popular support, and we see from opinion polls that there is continuing majority popular support for independence. What we require to deliver that is the legitimacy of an electoral event, not a referendum that we're never going to have, but a plebiscite election next year. And if John Swinney doesn't waken up and smell the coffee, his political legacy will be not dissimilar to that of his immediate, not his immediate predecessor, but the one before that. They'll go down in history as having absolutely shafted Scotland when victory is within our grasp. A united policy and a united movement and a strategy along the lines already described. Begging to Westminster is not what Scots should be doing. We should not be allowing ourselves to be, in essence, slapped across the chops with a wet cod when we're told we're being given back some of our own money. We should grab our own resources and use them for ourselves. We are a nation with a proud history, but we will become a nation with a proud future and a successful destiny when we take that power into our own hands and we're led not by donkeys any longer.
Here, here. Well said, Eva. Here's the thing, Alan. This, and it's coming. We know it's coming. Unless the rebels win at the conference of the SNP and it changes, but SNP one more mandate and they'll give us a referendum. It's not only wrong, it's a blatant lie. Now, everyone and your granny knows that. When John Swinney's saying it, even he, surely to God, he must know he's lying to the people of Scotland.
John knows very well what's going to happen if people vote SNP 1 and 2. Now, Starmer said, not now, not ever. John, are you listening to the words of your master? He is not going to listen to you, so why are you continuing to trust him? I'll tell you who you should trust. And these are the words of the late Canon Kenyon Wright. You may say no, but we are the people, and we say yes. Starmer has kicked off the political campaign for 2026. The ball's now firmly in our court. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to dribble it all around the houses, or are you going to take it straight on and score the goal? Because to do that, you've got to put people into the parliament who are going to fight and end this union. And there's only one group of people really at this moment doing that, putting country before party, and that is Liberate Scotland. If we are elected in en masse, we will go in there and we will bring an end to the Vichy Parliament, and we will start building the foundations of an independent Scottish Parliament again. That's what this is about. 2026 is one of the most important elections we will ever face. So let's get this unity on track. Let's all work together. Let's work against the Unionists. Don't give them an inch. And if we do that, 2026 will be the building block of an independent Scotland before 2030. We will be totally free.
I agree with you and Cardinal Kenyon. All my life, I've been shouting, we are the people. I have. Different context, perhaps, but anyway, after that, enough of that hilarity. One thing Starmer said, Lloyd, was a distraction. They don't want to debate their services. Now, the other thing I had this week was the Unionists would debate. Why could you debate when they lie? They lie about the genocide in Palestine. They lied about weapons of mass destruction. This week, there was I don't know if you noticed that there was a poll or information come out about train cancellations throughout the UK. And in Scotland, we had the lowest amount of cancellations, 2%, whereas down in England, I believe it was 3.5 or 4%. But when it was covered by the BBC News and STV News, who were coming on to shortly, they had a picture of Edinburgh Waverley, and they implied that they were worse than Scotland. The same with, the alcohol-related deaths have reduced in Scotland. They didn't show it that way or debate it that way. The same with A&E deaths. Again, A&E deaths are lower in Scotland than any other part of the UK, but the media, when they debate it, are saying and implying that they're worse than Scotland anywhere. You've just got to listen to Jackie Baillie every day. So his distraction and his debate, they don't want to debate. It's all mince.
Yeah, I mean, the people are not fooled by this. The people are not fooled by what they know to be untrue. People who use accident and emergency, the vast majority of people go through accident and emergency fairly rapidly and are well dealt with. And the people know that, and they talk to each other. The BBC can say what it likes about train timetables, about A&E, about any number of different things. They have completely and utterly lost the trust of the Scottish people. It's true when you look at the viewing figures. The viewing figures for the BBC, for BBC Scotland particularly, and the listening figures for BBC Radio Scotland out with sports programmes has utterly and completely collapsed in the past 10 to 15 years. For goodness sake, we had a situation where they announced this great new BBC Scotland station, which would have a big news output that happened at 9 o'clock. It was going to challenge Newsnight. It ended up being pulled off the air because it was getting less than 1,000 viewers. Less than 1,000 viewers. That's why it doesn't exist anymore. Remember it was called The Nine. Now, Roddy, these are the things that John Swinney needs to be saying. Don't say we've got better A&E outcomes than England and Wales. Don't say we've got better train timetables or rail timetable delivery better than England and Wales. What we need to be saying is, with the total control of our own economy and our natural resources, we would have an expanded A&E. We would have an expanded railway system. We would have a media that actually tells the people the truth and a positive story about the future. Now, to constantly compare ourselves, particularly the way that the senior figures in the Scottish National Party do, is to constantly compare figures with other countries of the United Kingdom does not progress the argument of independence. Because for every single time you do that, when what you should be saying is, with the powers of independence, with control of our economy, we would not be in this circumstance. We would not have any of these so-called failures of the Scottish government would not be failures, because we would be expanding and developing using the full extent of the powers that independence brings us. And this is the essential problem with devolution. At every single turn, you are forced into the situation where you can only compare yourselves with the other regions and nations of the United Kingdom. You're not comparing yourself on a worldwide basis with other countries. More importantly, you're constantly having to defend your own political decisions when you don't have a control over the finances required to deliver the policies. You are always, as Eva said, with the begging bowl to Westminster, when our country is the 14th richest country in the world, or it was rather in 2016. I'm not sure what it is now. It's maybe more than that. But with absolute control of our economy, control of our natural resources, control of all the tax base possible, and the ability to develop and expand the abilities of our people, we are the 14th richest country on the planet. As part of the United Kingdom, we are not. As part of the United Kingdom, we are underinvested. We are a country constantly having to, as Eva described as well, put sticking plasters on hemorrhaging wounds. because we don't have absolute control. And it's one of the things I really don't understand about particularly the new young crew coming into the SNP who all want to be elected in next year in 2026. Where is their ambition to actually govern a country? Because only with independence do you govern your country. We call it the Scottish government, but in reality it's the Scottish management. Because with a finite budget, all you're doing is managing that budget to meet certain targets. You will never, ever be able to get ahead of the game. You will never, ever be able to actually turn around and create genuine innovation. We talk about railway timetables. We have a smaller railway network now, right now, than we had 100 years ago. Less miles of track, less stations, less people working in it. The country hasn't changed. We still have the same geography. Why is it we have such a tiny, tiny infrastructure in our railways? Something that needs to be restored and replaced, as it has been done in many European countries. Why is it that we have hospitals in this country that were put together on public-private finance initiatives, whereby those hospitals are not owned by us? The Royal Infirmary of Edinburgh, in 3 years' time, will revert to its original owners, Balfour Beatty. Not NHS Lothian, not the Scottish Government, but a private company. Why is that? Because we don't control our own economy and we have to go begging and borrowing within rules and regulations set not by us, but by the British government. Now, if that is not the description of dependency, then what is? The only way we can get out of this and stop comparing ourselves in a cheap and nasty way with, oh, we're a bit better than Wales, we're a bit better than England, we're a bit better than Northern Ireland. Not good enough. We are the 14th richest country in the world. We do not need to be comparing ourselves with any region or nation of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. We need to be comparing ourselves with Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Belgium, France, Spain, Portugal. Those are the countries with which we need to share the stage. And that can be done next year in 2026 if there's a unity of purpose and everyone puts country and people before party and privilege.
Yeah, I agree with everything you say, except you and I were a wee bit apple and pears there. Because my point, the question I was asking you was, Stammer was talking about distraction and they won't debate. And I was pointing out, we don't debate because they lie when you go to debate. They say, oh, look at your A&E, look at your train time, ferries, don't forget the ferries, for God's sake. But we don't talk about the HS2 or Hinkley power station. That's the point I was making. They don't debate fair. And we've said it with Martin Geiser, God love him, and Colin Mackay, who are now asking that question, if it's is it a voluntary union and how do we get out of it? They don't want to debate. They never want to debate. Phil, moving on slightly, but on the same token, this man who denies democracy, this Starmer guy, who talks about, anything he wants and whatever he wants, but he doesn't tell the truth. He lies about a genocide. He lies about everything. Techie, going to stick up the latest wheeze, not in their manifesto, I hasten to add, but the British government want to bring in IDs for everyone. The super idea, there's Tony Blair saying, it's for being used to report potholes, make it sound safe and cuddly and warm. Oh, your potholes are your problem, which is just a bloody lie, is it not? It's nothing to do with potholes.
No, it's not. And as the last Starmer clip we played illustrated, the interview pointed out that Labour are doing things not in the manifesto. This is one of them. ID cards along with facial recognition and all the other restrictions on the rights of citizens, especially constraints on freedom of speech and movement, we are seeing radically increase across many Western countries. The US and the UK have become uber right-wing states. We have been for some time, and we see a continued move towards it, ever scarily to the right. And when you look at this is Palantir Technologies that are going to be used for this. Now, who are they? Well, the right wing, they're an element of the military-industrial complex.
They're Zionists.
Yes, part of the system that practices military Keynesianism and instructs Western politicians to pursue a state of permanent war, purely to generate control and profit. So Palantir's AI technology, which enables UK force commanders to efficiently identify targets on the battlefield, Palantir's technology will be integrated into the British Armed Forces network to upgrade their AI-powered capabilities. Use that in civil context in the UK. It's the same. It's the same point. They're identifying their enemies on the battlefield, and the battlefield is our streets. So, under such circumstances, this is not good for the people. It's just another controlling mechanism that these thieves will use to generate fear and continue to blame the poor and immigrants on the appalling state of our nation when it's patently obvious to anyone who does even a modicum of investigation that this is all about their insatiable greed. That's what got us here. The enemy of the Scottish, British, American, in fact, enemy of all peoples in the world, do not arrive with in boats, in little boats with nothing, but rather they arrive in private jets. These are the true enemies of our people, and they control what you hear via news, your education, your health, your job care, your job opportunities, what future your children have. And the only thing we can do to change that is to take control of our own destiny and control on our own future, which is independence, nothing less. And if you want it summarized perfectly, go again to George Carlin and the American Dream. Please check it out on YouTube. He nails it. It's called The American Dream. Please watch and judge for yourselves.
Thanks for that, Phil. The other thing about this, I put out a tweet this week as well on that, Eva. The thing is that maybe we shouldn't worry too much, because if we go back to, there was in 2002 the national programme for the NHS, where they were going to put everyone's details onto a register so we'd know what to do. Whereas it was abandoned 9 years later at a cost of £10 billion. Never worked. We can't forget Track and Trace, which was an app that was to help the economy. They spent 37 billion. It didn't work. Now, they're going to introduce this. I mean, for example, the national health thing you're talking about, here in Spain, I can tell you, I can go into any chemist, I hand over my medical card, they know all my prescriptions, they know what I've got, I go to any doctor, they've got all, it's universal. How we couldn't do it, I don't know. But this is going to be a massive amount of money. And there'll be, I mean, for example, and I've got another one coming up in a minute, but not everyone's going to accept it, are they?
No. In a way, this is a distraction, given that it's been announced at this particular time, because Starmer desperately needs us to be talking about something that's not the number of ministers that he's lost or the shady, seedy deals that there might have been in the background that led to his election. So I consider it's a squirrel. It's not particularly likely to proceed because there is mounting opposition against it. But it's also a very feudal attitude that he seems to have adopted. It seems like a them and us. Those are better than us. They're telling us they're going to keep tabs on us. Anybody ever suggested to a Scot that they're getting kept tabs on, they'll run a mile in the opposite direction. It'll not be happening. Similar positions obviously going to apply relative to Northern Ireland and the rights conferred by the Good Friday Agreement. But I need to go back a wee bit, Roddy, because you jogged my memory earlier on. You spoke about the people who had, in essence, been responsible for assisting in engineering the electoral system, the voting system for the Holyrood Parliament. And you spoke about Jim Wallace, Jack McConnell and Annabel Goldie. Let us remind ourselves for a moment of where these three people sit now. These devoted servants, public servants of the people of Scotland. Jack McConnell sent money back from the Scottish budget to Westminster, and he and Annabel Goldie and Jim Wallace sit in the House of Lords.
Yep.
Paid £300 odd a day. Winter's coming on. They're not worrying about eating or heating. They can cuddle into their ermine gown, their ermine blanket, when there are hundreds of thousands of people in Scotland worrying about whether they can eat or heat. When the working population of Scotland is of the order of 2.7 million, and at least 10% of those are chronically underpaid, particularly the single working poor. These are the people that politicians should be thinking about. We should be telling Starmer to stick his brick card up the dead-end, destitute alley that he wants to take Britain to, and he would certainly consign Scotland to, and we should be standing up and shouting for Scotland and for Scottish independence and for the unity of our movement at every possible opportunity. What we shouldn't be doing is being distracted by issues such as an ID card, which are important, but they're British issues. We should leave it to Westminster, and the easiest way to escape the impact of the Brit card is to vote for independence, and the way to get independence has been highlighted and delineated here ad infinitum. Let's get the hell out of there, and Starmer can do with his Brit card whatever the hell he wants, because it won't apply to us, because we'll be Brits no more.
Here. This, we want to spend billions and billions of pounds, Alan, so that you, the member of the public, can report potholes, or perhaps if your bins don't get lifted. Do you believe that for 1 second? That's why they're doing this?
No, I don't. I mean, if you're wanting to make it easier for people to report potholes, open the council buildings. Allow people to go into the council buildings to actually report it, because they've closed them all. But I mean, look who actually tried to start this. It was Tony Blair, the man who introduced the PFIs, which was destroying local services. The man who went into Iraq, killing millions of innocent people in an illegal war. The man who first brought in austerity. That's the kind of people that we are dealing with. This has got absolutely nothing to do with what they're saying it is. I mean, they claimed that it was for identifying immigrants. No, it wasn't. Now they're saying it's so as you could get a job. We know you live in this country if you're getting a job. Without one, you'll not get a job. That's what the national insurance number's for.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot get a job without showing your national insurance number. It's as simple as that. So we don't need something else. And what annoys me the most is there is some people who think, oh, it's only an ID card. What harm will it do? The harm it does is because once it's passed, it takes secondary legislation to change the way it's used, which means it doesn't go through full parliamentary scrutiny. The minister could change it. And that is very dangerous powers to give to any one individual. Because remember, what we think is bad enough just now, Labour having that power. What if Farage gets in next time round? What's he going to do with a national ID? And also remember, because this is digital, the information is going to be online. And all information you've got online is up for sale to the highest bidder. The government will be selling all your information to their friends. That's what this is really about, to bring in money and control on your life. Correct. Because who is the biggest breach of data protection? It's your government. Local government or national government. They're the ones that have the major leaks from your online stuff. And they're more likely to be hacked. Because let's face it, there is not anything that is beyond being hacked. So this is an extremely dangerous line for us to go down. And to be quite honest with you, the Brit card, because that's what it is, there's only one place I'll be swiping it. And that's between the cheeks of the man who brings it out, where I ram it back to where it should be left, up his jacksie.
According to your Ukrainian rent boys, apparently you would like that. But, we've got passports, we've got driving licenses, as you say, national insurance numbers, and they think they're trying to sell the idea to the knuckle draggers, Lloyd, that someone who's crossed the Mediterranean or got all the way through Europe, he's hitchhiked and walked, starved, got to France, got up right through France, and got to the ready to cross the channel, and goes, oh no, wait a minute, I don't have an ID card. I'll no bother. A load of mince.
Yeah, I mean, that very thing is the thing that tells you there's something more sinister going on, apart from, of course, the fact that the suggestion that Palantir Industries will be the ones who will be running this operation, knowing that they are, as you pointed out, Roddy, they are an organisation who is very, very close to the Israeli government. This is about social control in one form or another. And I find it interesting that the week that Keir Starmer comes under the greatest pressure with the announcement that Andy Burnham might be trying to unseat him, that there is great rebellion amongst his own ranks, that he seems now to be putting his foot on the accelerator to get certain things moving. Is this another part of Starmer's association with the military-industrial complex, and particularly the Israeli military-industrial complex, for whom he clearly works? I think the other side of it is when they lie to you about what they want it for, as Alan pointed out, to work in this country you need a national insurance number. If you don't have a national insurance number, then you're working illegally. Now, I would suggest that rather than bringing in ID cards, that we should maybe set up a unit to look at the number of people who are working illegally in this country. There's been examination of some of the delivery organisations, Deliveroo, Just Eat. These people I see cycling around Edinburgh delivering meals to people. That in actual fact there's a serious kind of illegal work scam going on there, whereby people are buying up IDs with Deliveroo and Just Eat and then handing them out to people for a fee. Now, I think examining that would be better than bringing in an ID card. I mean, take into consideration other things. For instance, people with educational difficulties, people with Alzheimer's, people with dementia, people with autism, having to carry a card, get a card, and operate it on a digital basis. What about people who are genuinely in poverty, who will have to have a phone? I keep seeing these people on television saying that no, there's nothing to worry about with this digital ID because everybody uses their phones anyway. Everybody that's got money enough to buy an iPhone or a digital phone, how much do they cost? £400, £500? Are they, where are people to find the money for this? This is about social control and nothing else. And the dangers of it are too many to enumerate. But also, Eva referred to it briefly. There's a thing called the Good Friday Agreement. And the Good Friday Agreement is an international treaty. A tripartite.
Can you put that up, Hazel? Well, you're going to go, Lloyd, sorry.
Yeah, it's a tripartite treaty. It's the United Kingdom, the European Union, and the Republic of Ireland. And it recognises that, not everyone who lives in the north of Ireland, which currently is still part of the the occupied 6 counties of the north of Ireland are still part of the United Kingdom. Not everybody there is British. So this concept of a Brit mandatory digital ID card, as Michelle O'Neill, First Minister of Northern Ireland, points out, is a nonsense in itself. But it also, I think, makes clear, and it refers back to when Starmer was asked about the rights of the Scottish people to have a referendum, the rights of the Scottish people in a broader sense. He's now trampling over the rights of the people of Northern Ireland without a thought in his head. Is this man aware that he's the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland? And that when he makes statements which are to appease his own base or whatever, he has to take into account that the other nations of this united or disunited kingdom, however you want to see it, that they have rights as well. I don't think, excuse me, I don't think he does. I think this man shouldn't be the Prime Minister of this country because he clearly doesn't and cannot delineate between the powers that he has and the powers that he doesn't have. It's an appalling idea. Digital ID is about social control and nothing more.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the clock's beginning to beat us. There's a few things I want to get in, guys. And one of them, Phil, is that, we talk about the man who John Swinney's counting on to give him a Section 30, this Democrat. He is banned for the Labour Party conference coming up early next month. They have blocked, I think we've got something on it, Techie. They've blocked 30 resolutions on Gaza, not to talk about it, because they don't want the word genocide getting mentioned. They don't want any scrutiny of that they're supporting, not just supporting, but participating in a genocide in our name. He's not a Democrat. nor is the Labour Party democratic.
No, that's absolutely correct. And just a small comment on some of the stuff we've talked about before I mention this. SSRG's David Henry, Mark Knott and old mucker Douglas Chapman from SNP, the 56, were visiting me recently in Brussels for the EFTA conference last Thursday, and more on that another time. But I've got to mention myself as well, mentioned earlier by Eva and Lloyd, what Salvo, Sarah Sawyers, Alf Baird, Robert Black, Ailsa Gray, good point, Eva, she was brilliant, and Craig Murray, along with SSRG, who made a magnificent presentation to the UN on Scotland's decolonisation. It's superb, and we should put a link up to these videos soon or in some place so the independentistas, the people, can be informed, because we know that unification alone leads inevitably to independence, so we must support those on our side. On your point, Lloyd, sorry, guys, and Roddy, this is the Canary reporting. The Labour Party officials are attempting specifically to stifle debate on Israel and Palestine at the party conference. So they're preventing calls for the government to take meaningful steps to end complicity in the Zionist entity's genocide in Glasgow. And bear in mind, recognising Palestine is virtue signalling. It's not a solution. It's just there to appease us. This disgraceful move comes amid the Labour government's symbolic but largely tokenistic and entirely inadequate in isolation recognition of a Palestinian state. So the Labour conference sees shameless suppression of motions for Palestine and against Israel. And this is ahead of the party conference in Liverpool, which is the 28th. Just tomorrow. The conference committee met Thursday. Is there foreign interference here? Undoubtedly. Starmer's in the pocket of Israel. And did we all appreciate the walkout at the UN on the war criminal Netanyahu?
Yeah.
I sincerely hope so. More of this, please, and more positive action to stop this genocide, including the exclusion of Israel from the UN.
On lies, and as I say, the clock, and I'm jumping onto a few more topics, Eva. But Aberdeen took a beating this week, a real beating, and I'm not talking about the football team. I'm talking about, there's two things come up. One was STV closing down, and I'm sure Lloyd might have something to say on this as well. They're going to cut 60 jobs in Axe the North news programme. Now, typical, the most, furthest flung places get reduced. Maybe if they told the truth, things would be better, because they never do tell the truth. They give the British slant every time. If they were honest with their news, they maybe wouldn't need to shut down, just side. But the other one, Tech, if you could put it up, we were promised before the election by Labour 1,000 jobs in GB Energy in Aberdeen. How many jobs have we got so far? 29. Yep. 29 out of 1,000. Will we ever see the other 971?
Well, they speak with forked tongue, and we knew this before last year's election. And this news is not news, it is entirely as anticipated, but it came out in the same week that the Scottish Parliament had been debating whether or not Scotland could afford to send all Scottish school children on a residential course somewhere within Scotland, a wee holiday once a year. And those two events might seem very distinct and different from each other, but they're connected because they both made me think about Trainspotting 1, when the whole gang are up, in the mountains in the country, and they're shouting about how it's shite being Scottish. Well, if Scotland had its own energy company, state-owned energy company, or its own house building corporation, or a wind fund, a wave fund, or an oil fund, not only would we have the jobs in Scotland that GB Energy never will create, but we would be controlling our own resources, our children, our single working poor, those recovering from illness, or any Scot that wants it, would have the wherewithal, either because they'd earned it or because their country, their government, their welfare state was looking after them enough to make sure it happened. They'd have the wherewithal to travel Scotland, to have decent holidays in our country, to see what a beautiful place we live in, to see the measure and the value of our resources, to understand the value of being Scots, and it's about far more than the price of being Scots. They would understand the cost of the Union. We would have national pride. We would realise the potential of our people, and we would say Scotland is shite, no more. That's what Scots need to sit up and think very hard about, and look in the mirror and decide what is it that you want for your future destiny and for our country. Is it thrilled to a miserable union that's reversing in progress, becoming ever more authoritarian, or is it looking forward? And it is a tale of two Scotlands, to a brighter tomorrow where we deliver what the people need, the people want, and what our country can afford to do, which is standing on our own 2 feet.
Yeah, well said. It's true. I mean, you're talking there about a holiday for the kids, a wee breakaway. Here in Spain, which is allegedly, supposedly nowhere near as rich as the United Kingdom, the pensions for the pensioners are 3 to 4 times higher than in the UK. Plus the fact you don't get, if you're married, oh, well, here's your married allowance. You each get a independence of your own money and a pension. But every year, pensioners in Spain get a 3 weeks full board in a hotel throughout Spain. Now, that can be done. It's all about priorities and wanting to. And the British government don't. They just want to make money for their pals and put their money offshore. One of the other things this week, Alan, was that the Italian and the Spanish, again, God bless them, and the Chinese, apparently 2 navies, are now going to the Mediterranean to escort the flotilla, the Saddam flotilla, to Gaza. This is great news. The Royal Navy, of course, won't turn up, but it'd be great. What happens if the Israelis open fire on these ships and they return fire? Spain's in NATO. Italy's in NATO. If they invoke Article 5, will Britain and the US come to the raid and attack Israel?
That's a very good question, but I doubt it very much. I mean, let's face it, that Britain not sending the Royal Navy there to escort that ship just shows how empty their pledge to recognise the state of Palestine actually was.
Yeah.
If you're going to pledge assistance to these people, then make sure it's in actions and not just in words. The Israeli government are a rogue government who are committing genocidal practices, and it's time the rest of the world clamped down on it. Was said after the Germans that would never happen again. Well, it is. And it is the people who are supposed to be representing the individuals who still remember the horrors of the Holocaust that are doing it. And they are saying it's not in their name. That's why their government is rogue. Now, it is ridiculous that we have to send flotillas over there because the aid should be getting through. But the Israelis are refusing. That is aid for children and women. And as Eva said many times before, there are children in Gaza who are having their limbs amputated without any anaesthetic. Just imagine that being your child. It's horrific. Mm-hmm. And we have got to support these flotillas every chance that we get. And I'm disgusted that the Westminster Parliament are refusing to give them the protection that they should have.
British citizens in that boat. But let's say, we forgot there was the Holocaust in 1940, 45, whatever. But we also, more recently, Rwanda, Democratic Republic of Congo, as well as Palestine. Here's the thing they all have in common. They're not white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. That's why their lives are worth less value to our globalist and Western governments. Last question to you, Lloyd, and it's the question, I want to see a video as well. Phil let the cat out of the bag a wee bit. But the question is, Israel is now suggesting they're going to recognise the Falkland Isles as the Malvinas and Argentina the right to sovereignty over as a wee petulant kick because Britain dared to suggest that Palestine should be recognised. There you go. But have you got a video for us? It's Netanyahu, that world leader, that man who we're told by the British and American governments is a great guy and loved and a wee genius. Stick it up. Shows the UN how they thought of Netanyahu when he went to make a speech. Now, two things on just before you answer that, Lloyd, is the clapping and cheering you're hearing. The best of it is what they don't realise, there's a rent-a-mob of Israelis up in the balcony, and they're trying to clap and applaud Netanyahu, and all they're doing is giving this great walkout, who they were all leaving quietly and with dignity. All is giving them a cheer. But it shows that the world, with the exception of a very few nations, are totally opposed to what's happening in the Western Asia and Palestine.
Yes, that's very true. Just to go back to the original point about the Israeli threat to recognise the Falkland Islands as the Malvinas. I mean, from my perspective, Las Malvinas son Argentinas, and they always have been and always will be. But this was part of a tactic that we didn't see in our newspapers. After the Spanish announced that they were having the arms embargo, there was a mass of TikTok videos and WhatsApp messages that went out from Israel pointing out that Israel would now recognise Catalonia, Galicia and the Basque Country as independent nations, and how would Spain like that? This is, as you described it, it's the behaviour of a petulant child. It's interesting, the country has been in existence since 1948, and so in the nations of the world, yes, it is a petulant child in terms of, if you compare it with other countries and the ages of other countries. But there's not much more to say. The fact that Netanyahu was allowed to fly to New York and to appear in person at the United Nations, meanwhile the head of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, was not allowed to. It tells you everything you need to know, and I think that relates directly to the other point you make, which Alan made as well, is that if these people were in the Ukraine and were being bombed and shelled and starved in the manner in which the good people of Gaza and the West Bank are being, things would be different. And that's primarily down to the colour of their skin. And that's the tragedy in real terms. And some of the people in this country really need to wake up to themselves and recognise to themselves that simply making a decision about whether a child has a right to life or a right to death based upon the taint or the tinge or the colour of their skin simply is not acceptable and is entirely and completely inhuman.
Absolutely. That's a special word I've got for people of a certain football team, one I happen to like myself. Because your opponents are against genocide and rightly display flags of Palestinian support, you do not make yourself look great by supporting the people committing a genocide. You are on the wrong side. Don't do it. It's appalling. Child could be your, as Alan's like, it could be your child, your mother, your grand, your sister, your dad, your whoever. There is a genocide. For God's sake, it's a game of football. Or in our case at the moment, not much. Anyway, enough. The clock is beating us, my dear friends, as always. I hope you've enjoyed this. And for you viewing, I hope you take this away. The union's not good for us. Unity is what we need. And in May next year, we actually can be independent or on the road to independence if we unite and vote wisely. Until we see you, you and yours take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.